Hey, welcome to Webcomic Story Builder, where I go through webtoons and webcomics that I have read and share storytelling tips and tricks catered towards webcomic creators. So if you did watch my last video, you may know that I am working on a villainess life simulation game where you play as a villainess destined for basically the same ending most villainesses have, and your choices in the game influence this character's life. So you can start a family, you can go to school, you can make friends, make enemies, you can cheat, you can commit crime, you can make money however way you want. The game is in very early development. It's not finished yet. So all those things I spoke about aren't exactly there yet, but they are things I do plan on adding. And the best way to make the game as fun as possible is to get feedback from players, from the people who I want to play my game. So I would kindly appreciate if you would check the link in the description to play the game and leave feedback. Whether it's positive feedback or negative feedback, it all helps me to make the game as fun as it can be. And as I am making a villainess life simulation game, I thought it would only be appropriate to talk about a villainess webcomic. And so today I will be talking about Marriage of Convenience. Marriage of Convenience is a tapas webcomic about a noble woman called Bianca de Arno, and she is married to a nobleman called Zachary de Arno. Bianca de Arno is proud, wealthy, and some would describe her as spoilt. Okay, maybe everyone would describe her as spoilt. She's very, very unliked by everyone in the Arno territory, and she's from the kingdom of Severin. Although by the time we see her, so from when the chapter starts, she's not looking so much like a noble. She wanders the streets in rags, and her clothes are literally dirty and ripped, and she's coughing blood, and it looks like she contracted some sort of like sickness or something, and her hair is cut short, and she's not looking very good. She looks like she's on the verge of death, and she's in front of an altar. She's in front of a statue, and she's begging for another chance. She's begging the gods. She's saying, I know I was ungrateful before. I know I complained before. Please, please give me one more chance and I won't do what I did before. So she's desperate to start her life all over again. And she faints. Well, it looks like she lost her life, but she faints and she wakes up again. And she looks in the mirror and she looks different. Her hair is longer, her face is smoother, her skin is clean, there's no blemishes, and she looks younger. And she realizes she's traveled back in time. And I would have been like, finally, like the gods have answered my prayers. But no, she's annoyed. She did not want the gods to answer her prayers in this way. So she's disappointed, she's annoyed, she's angry, and she's shouting, no, that this is not what I wanted. This isn't how it was supposed to be. And so she's sent back to her 19-year-old self. Not sure how old she was when that whole thing in the start happened. But in a sense, the gods did answer her prayers. She's been given another chance to start all over again. But literally, as Bianca is having this breakdown, the maids are outside gossiping about how much of a terrible and wicked wife she is and how she spends all of her husband's money. So literally, while her husband is out in war fighting for the country, fighting for the kingdom, risking his life, she's at home spending all of his money, and from time to time she would throw fits, and during her fits she would destroy all this expensive furniture and clothing and everything. And people were very unhappy with her because they believe if it weren't for her, their territory could be even more prosperous, because their lord is earning so much money from going into these battles, but he's spending all that money on her and she's wasting it. She's breaking all this furniture. And the people are scared. They're worried because their lord is in battle every day basically, and at any moment he could lose his life. And although he's been married to Bianca for almost 10 years, they don't think they've even consummated the marriage. So they're lacking an heir. Like they need an heir. The people want an heir, because before Zachary took over as lord, the territory was in chaos. There was no one. And that just fuels their dislike of Bianca. The fact that she hasn't produced an heir, she's spoilt, she's spending all the money, and she doesn't seem to really care about her husband who's risking his life every day. Anyway, so Bianca knows this. She knows that her reputation with the people is so terrible that it led to the sad ending she had in technically in her previous life, in the life before she made that wish. And the fact that she didn't have an heir in her country, a woman without an heir can be thrown out, like bang, just kicked out of the household, and would have nowhere to go, no one to rely on, unless she had any male relatives willing to take her in. So Bianca knows now that she has the second chance, she's in a prickly situation, and she has to do everything she can to avoid that sad ending from before, to avoid being kicked out, and to avoid having to live and beg on the streets. And so now she's determined. She's going to find her man, and she's going to make sure he gives her a baby, even if it's the last thing she does. And so her first course of action is to go to the head butler, Vincent, but she calls him Vinny. She bursts in the door and she's like, when is my husband returning? And Vinny's confused because usually Bianca does not leave her room. She's usually in her room all day, either crying or throwing a fit or requesting items. But he lets her know your husband will be back in the winter. And surely enough, her husband does return. So he's coming in back from war with his soldiers, and the people are cheering, they're clapping, their lord has returned, they're all happy, and they're just, you can tell that his people love him, that he's a great lord. Even his three main soldiers, his three commanders, they're all joking with him. There's no tension, there's no fear of offending someone who's higher ranking than you are. They feel comfortable being casual with him. So there's Robert, and Robert's kind of has like has medium length black hair, and then there is Gaspar. He is more reserved, quiet, he's tall, he's big, has like silverish hair, greyish hair. And then there is Sauver. He has brown hair, but it's sort of shoulder length, and he's jokey, he's like the comedic one in the group. He's the comedic character that we all need. And they are his three main men. And he's looking through his, what are those things called? Long stethoscope? Telescope, that's what it is. He's looking through his telescope. And he sees Bianca cheering to herself, and she's like holding her fist up to the heavens, and basically what she's doing is she is encouraging herself, she's hyping herself up for having a child and changing her life this time around. And he's just looking at her through his telescope, and he's confused, and they're all joking with him and laughing with each other. And their lord, Zachary, he says, he's like, I'm going to go take a shower. So he goes to his room to like have a meal, have a bath. And just as he leaves, Bianca comes, and the guys are joking, and they're like, behind you. And they look down, and it's Bianca. And Sauver, he's shocked because the last time he saw Bianca, she was a child, but now she's all grown up. She's 19, and he sees the fur coat that she's wearing, and he's thinking, of course, she's as extravagant as ever. Like, she may be older, but she still has expensive taste. And so he's kind of disappointed, but he doesn't show it too much. But I think Robert shows it a bit more, that he's disappointed as well. Anyway, so Bianca's there looking for her husband. The three commanders, they direct her to where her husband is, and she goes up to his room, and she peeks through the door, and she sees him changing, and she's like, oh my gosh, like, because you can see his abs and everything, and she's blushing a bit, but she says to herself, you know what, no. And then she walks in there, and she tells him, I need to talk to you. And he's like, is this something urgent? If it's urgent, speak to the head butler. And she says, I'm your wife, I can speak to you whenever I want to. And so he's like fine, and the head butler gives them their privacy because he was in the room talking to the lord before she arrived about some sort of documents or something. I guess some post-war discussions. So the head butler leaves to give them privacy, but of course our lovely head butler, he presses his ear against the door to sort of eavesdrop on their conversation. And so Bianca, she readies herself because she's not going to let any opportunity go to waste. As long as she has the chance to change her life and avoid that depressing ending, she's going to take it. And she readies her heart and gathers her courage. And she tells him, I'm your wife. And of course, wives have their duties, and I would like to fulfill my duties. And he's like, what do you mean? And she tells him she wants to produce an heir. And he sort of like teases her, and he's asking her, do you even know what's involved in producing an heir? As if like she's a child that doesn't understand what she's saying. And she's thinking like, technically she's older than him because she lived longer before she reincarnated or went back in time. Not sure what happened there, but mentally she's a bit older than him. And like she thinks back to her, like they've like done the deed before she died. They've done the deed a few times, so she knows, like she knows more than him. And she doesn't let his words bring her down, and she stands up to him and she's like, yeah, I know, so let's do it. And he sort of tests her, like he's pushing her back a bit with like his like the force of his presence, and she like staggers a bit and walks backwards, and he pushes her against the wall. Well, not pushes her against the wall, but he walks close enough where she's like moving backwards and her back hits the wall. But she's not gonna back down because, you know, she doesn't want to die. It's either death or have a child. And although she's scared of him, so she's like, she's visibly scared of him, and he can tell as well that she's scared of him. He decides, you know what, this just isn't it. She's scared. Let's just go. Like, you can try to do your wifely duties, but if you're scared of me, it's not going to work. Like, he's sort of giving that impression. And she thinks back to the sad life she lives, and so she grabs his arm and she's like, do you remember how much you received for my dowry? So like the payment that he got when she became his wife. I think it's meant to like look after, like it's meant for looking after the wife when she went to her husband's household, when she joined his family. So the wife's family would send a dowry payment, sort of like a, here, take care of her, make sure you look after her, here's how much she's worth to us. That's the sense I get. At least that's what I think it is. But so she asks him, do you know how much it was? Like, do you remember how much it was? And he says to her, 400 calves, 900 pigs, 100 silver bowls, 300 bolts of silk, 2 chests of jewels, and a portion of your family's territory. So that basically is the total of Arno's budget for 2 years. So that's like a 2-year budget that he received for marrying this woman. And she is freaked because in their country, if the guy memorizes the dowry payment for his wife, that's a sign that he's planning on divorcing her and marrying someone else. Because when a man divorces his wife, he has to pay back that money. And she's thinking he's going to divorce her, pay back that exact money, which is why he's memorizing it, and which means he has a mistress. So her chances of having a child with him, or rather the probability that he'll allow her to have a child with him, are lower because he has a mistress, and she's feeling threatened. And so she comes up with this assumption, and she's like, don't worry, you can be with your mistress, do whatever, put her under me, as long as I am still your wife, just don't divorce me, basically. Like, she's not exactly begging, but she's being indifferent. You know, have a mistress, that's fine, but I'm still your wife and don't forget it. It's basically what she's telling him. And he looks angry, like shocked, but also angry. Like, he looks seriously scary, and you can tell that what she just said offended him. So you can kind of tell that there's this huge misunderstanding between them. But of course, she's not seeing it, she's not noticing it. She just thinks that he's angry or annoyed that she figured him out. But then he takes a breather and he's like, you know what, I don't know who told you those lies, but we can discuss an heir at a later date. So he's telling her, I don't have a mistress, let's talk about this later. and he calls his head butler back and tells him to escort his wife back to her room. And as the head butler is taking her back to her room, she drops her fur coat on the floor. I'm sitting there thinking, this is not going to be easy. Like, her having a child for him is going to be way, way harder than she initially thought. But the rejection just fuels her. It just makes her even more determined, because she knows that in a few years, he's not going to be there anymore. He's going to sadly fall in battle. And that's sort of what kicks off her down spiral until she eventually ends up homeless and sickly. So while she's standing by the window, thinking about how he's cheating on her and has a mistress and how he doesn't love her and things like that, he's still thinking, and he's still processing everything that happened. He's thinking about how when she first arrived, her nursemaid would scold him and tell him to look after her. And if he brought her cheap items, she'd tell him off and remind him that Bianca is of a higher status than he is. Her family are so high up in nobility that she could have married I think it was a baron. She could have married a baron. Was it a baron? But she could have married someone seriously high status. Like, her family was really above where he is. So she's like, the nursemaid's just telling him that she kind of downgraded by marrying him, and so he owes it to her to treat her better, because of course she's like 11 years old or so, and she's in a foreign place with a man who she barely knows, and the only one who she does know and who she actually opens up to is her nursemaid. And apparently she's very sensitive to the cold as well, so her nursemaid is like, stop buying her cheap stuff, buy her quality items so she doesn't get sick, take care of her. Basically, he's telling her to treat her to the utmost, treat her the way she deserves to be treated, as a noble woman. So he's thinking back to that day and thinking about how he wants to give her the best. He wants to be the best husband for her, which is why he told his head butler to buy her anything she wants. So she wasn't just spending his money like bam. He permitted it to happen. He allowed it to happen. He wants her to live comfortably. And although everyone judges her for her choice in items, especially that fur coat that she bought, like when his 3 guards saw her in that fur coat, they weren't very pleased. But when she drops it in his room, he goes back to her and he finds her standing by the window, and he covers her shoulders with the fur coat, and he tells her, it looks good on you, like you look beautiful with that on. Like, he doesn't tell her off, he doesn't judge her or anything, he admires her. So it kind of shows the different perspective, like how they're all, like, he's seeing things differently to how his people are seeing things. He doesn't see her the way his people. The next day, everyone is literally gossiping about how Bianca and Zachary were interacting, because people are surprised. They don't see the Lord and Lady interact much. She's usually in her room and he's usually out on the battlefield. And so they're happy, like, could it possibly be that their Lord and Lady are getting along even better? Like, could they finally have an heir soon? So everyone's happy, everyone's glad to hear this news. Some people don't believe it, like they're unsure, like it's probably just a rumor or it's just temporary. And so the maids are gossiping, like they're cleaning the floor, washing up, as like doing their duties, and they're kind of gossiping. And there's this one maid, and I kind of sense something with her, like she's going to be important later on. But she's very bright, very cheery, and she's very, very happy. Like, she's genuinely happy for Bianca, that her relationship with the Lord is improving, that her relationship with Zachary is improving. But then there's this other maid, and she's very salty. Like, she doesn't trust Bianca at all. She doesn't seem to like Bianca either. So as the maids are happy and just enjoying and celebrating, the blonde maid just starts ruining the happy environment. So she's talking about so she starts gossiping, and she's like, do you really think the Lord is going to be happy with that ugly woman? Like, she is ripping Bianca apart. She's saying how Bianca looks like a frog, and her skin is like scaly or something, and dry and gross and stiff, and how she's seriously skinny and no guy's ever going to fall in love with her. And I'm just like, this is not giving good vibes. Like, something's gonna happen. So the other maids are making this face, and you can kind of tell it's one of those moments where someone says something and the person that they're talking about is in the area, or someone important is in the area. And so the maid, the blonde maid, she just keeps talking, and she's like, Bianca's so ugly, she's skinny, she's gross, she's rude, she's horrible. Like, Zachary doesn't need a woman like her. She doesn't deserve Zachary. And then she goes a step further and she's like, I bet I could please Zachary better in bed. I bet I could warm his heart better. And starts comparing herself and talking about how she's a better woman for the lord of their boss, basically, their master. And of course, Bianca was right behind her, and Bianca heard pretty much everything. And the minute the blonde maid turns around and sees Bianca, she gets a big slap across the face, and her cheeks are swollen and red. And Bianca's furious. She calls for someone to bring I think it's called a switch. So she calls for someone to bring a switch. I'm not too sure what that is, but it's sort of like a cane, I think. She tells the maid to like bring out her hands and face them like so that the palms are facing up, and the palms of her hands are like close together, and Bianca starts like hitting her hands repeatedly over and over and over and over again. And she just like, it was like she could go on forever. Like, she was that angry that she could do this forever. And then Robert, one of Zachary's 3 commanders, he walks in on the situation. And from his perspective, all he sees is Bianca raging on this maid, this poor maid who has no status compared to Bianca. And Bianca, with this terrible reputation, hitting a maid. And he grabs her arm and tells her to stop. He tells her that this is enough. This is a maid. You do not treat your maids like this. You treat your maids with care and kindness, of course. And Bianca's she's done with it. She's like, I think she says something like, if you want me to stop, fine, I'll stop. But don't expect me to like forgive a maid who talks about me like this. She says something along those lines. And so Robert's like, his impression of her just worsens. And Bianca's annoyed that he stopped her, but she's not going to bother because she feels... she's feeling a bit out of place in a sense. And of course, the maid's grateful. She's like, it's like she's preparing her story. She's preparing what she's going to say just in case they ask. And around that moment, Zachary comes in and he's like, what in the world is going on here? And so he just sees one of his most trusted knights holding the hand of his wife, as his wife is holding like a switch or a cane, and the maid with her bleeding hands. And this is like just a terrible scene. It looks terrible for Bianca, but he sees that's the scene. But the first thing he sees isn't the bloodied crying maid. It's Bianca's hands and how red and swollen they've become because of the cane that she was holding, the switch she was holding. And he tells his head butler to quickly call a physician to treat Bianca's wounded hand. And he asks, what is going on here? Like, what's happening? And he's like, why is my wife's hand bleeding so much? And so, like Robert says, I found Bianca beating this maid. And the maid sort of like, she's of everyone there, she's one of the lowest status. So she doesn't say too much, but she prepares, she prepares her puppy face to look like she's been wronged. So not to bring it up too much, but sort of like a Rashta situation. So she's gotten that face ready, prepared to act like she's the victim in that situation. And Bianca's now she's really done with it. She drops the cane, the switch. She's like, you know what, take it. I'm out. Go. If this woman is your mistress, because the way the maid was talking, it gave Bianca the impression that she is the mistress that she's been worried about this whole time. And so she's like, you know what, take it. If this is your mistress, fine. Treat her wounds, do whatever. Like, she's not saying she's divorcing him, but she's just leaving the situation. She's going back to her room. And now Zachary definitely wants an explanation. He demands an explanation about what happened. And the maid is trying to downplay everything that happened and say something like, I was just cleaning, I was minding my business, and then Bianca came out of nowhere and started hitting me as if, she did nothing wrong. Even though she was talking about taking her boss's husband away from her and talking badly about her boss's looks and everything. But sadly for the maids, there were witnesses, there were other maids who were there, and one of the maids goes to the head butler and tells him everything, everything that she hears, everything that the maid said, the blonde maid said. And the head butler, of course, tells Zachary, and of course, it doesn't end well for the blonde maid. Zachary, because Zachary's known as this kind-hearted master. Even if someone stole from him, he'd give them the most lenient punishment he can. So the maid she's expecting him to treat her with the same leniency, but he glares at her and walks away. And the head butler tells her, "Pack your bags, you're out. Like, you're through, you're done. If you can't learn to at least talk with discretion, at least mask your emotions and not be so obvious, then you don't belong here. You can't work here." And so she is fired. She is let go of. Zachary's he's still worried about his wife. Like, is she okay? How was her hand? But Bianca's still very furious with him, because she still thinks that maid was his mistress. So Bianca, she's in her room. She's upset, and the maid that told the head butler everything that happened, she comes to Bianca with a bucket of herb infused water, and she dips cloth in it, and she treats Bianca's hand, and she feels very, very, very sorry for Bianca. There's this connection she feels to Bianca. Like, Bianca came in when she was young, and she reminds me of my little sister. I want to treat her well. I don't think she deserves to be treated the way she's treated. I want to help her have a positive experience in this place. And this whole time, this maid, she was the narrator. She's the narrator telling us Bianca's story with Zachary. So as Bianca is getting her wounds treated, Zachary he's in his study, and he tells he's thinking about how, his wife rarely comes out of her room, and the one time she chooses to come out, this happens. And so he's worried about her. So he asks one of his 3 commanders, he summons them to his study, to his room, and he tells them, okay, one of you is going to guard my wife. But we don't know who yet. That's up to Bianca to choose. We don't know who yet. But he wants one of them to guard her and look after her. And he thinks back to... So he's doing a lot of thinking back. So he feels a lot of responsibility for making sure that Bianca's life with him is a cheerful one, it's a happy one, where all her needs are met, and she feels happy and comfortable. And so he starts thinking back to how he started, why he married her in the first place. So back way when, 10 years ago, he was just a normal soldier and the son of a viscount. So he was still the Lord of Arno. But he was approached by Bianca's father, who was the right-hand man of the prince. So Bianca's family are really up there. They have influence. And so her dad is the right-hand man of the prince, the crown prince. And he approached Zachary and told him, I have a deal I want to make with you. Let's make a deal. I see you're good with the sword. I see you're clearly a capable person. I would like you to become the right-hand man of the prince, to guard the prince, to help the prince, the crown prince, achieve his coronation one day, because the crown prince has a younger brother who also has some believers, some followers who want him to be the prince, the king, rather than the crown prince. So Bianca's father wants the crown prince to successfully become the next king, and I'm sensing he's got some sort of plan. He's scheming something. So he recruits Zachary to join his faction and fight for the crown prince, which is one of the reasons why Zachary's always going out to war. He wants to give Bianca a good life, but through the money he earns from these battles, but he's also fighting for the crown prince. So in return, Zachary receives prestige because he's fighting for the crown prince. He receives prestige, and also he receives Bianca. A marriage of convenience. He receives Bianca. And I'm just wondering, why is Bianca's father so willing to give her up so quickly? Almost like he's using her as an item for his negotiation. as if she's not his daughter, but money that he can just give away. And also, when Bianca was homeless and on the verge of death, where was her father? Where was her father and her brother? So I'm just wondering what's going on here. Clearly, her family don't seem to care about her very much. So based on everything, it seems Bianca is truly all alone. Like, she has no one. Maybe she had her nursemaid, but she died 5 years ago, and since then Bianca hasn't had anyone to rely on. And I guess that's why Zachary tries so hard to provide for her. But now she has a new maid, and this new maid also really cares about her and sees her as almost a younger sister who is of higher status. So those are the first 7 chapters of Marriage of Convenience. I am not very far into the webtoon myself, and I am so looking forward to finding out the full story of Bianca's life. I have a feeling that the Crown Prince may be involved in the future. I'm not certain. Like, he may come into it. He does seem like a very important character, like figure in general, from the flashback. But if you would like to check out the webcomic, it is on Tapas. I will also leave a description. I will also leave a link in the description. And please do also check out the villainess life simulation game I am working on, and make sure you leave your feedback so I can improve on the game and eventually release it officially. So it's not officially released, but I do really, really look forward to officially releasing it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video.